SportsCon.
I got the Boston Celtics going to the finals.
I got to win the Milwaukee.
It's time to represent your city. Put your hands up. Colin, you know we do it for Boston. Hey, ain't nobody gonna like Boston. Yeah, hey, can't nobody do it like Boston. Where the legends get made, where the banners get raised, right? Life's big stage. Boston. All the fire we bring in a city full of rings. It's a beautiful thing out in Boston. And you ain't hard like that. You don't put it on the line with your squad like that. That's right, Boston. All we do is win like cigars in the gym, and we at it again. I say, Beantown, what's up? What's up? 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 Feel the energy shift. Now we jumping at the gym. Represent, showing out how we ball above the rim. Larry Legend, 86 to the truth in 08. Cement your name with the all-time greats. Still banner 18 in the Raptors. Celtic green, only green that matters. It's about that time. Ain't another city that's louder than mine. Always gonna shine with the game on the line. What you think was gonna happen, man? That's how we do it in Boston. Ain't nobody gonna like Boston. Yeah. Can't nobody do it like Boston.
All right. Welcome into this episode of the Dynasty Proud podcast presented by BSEN. I'm Ryan, and I am at 19_loading on Twitter. Alex is here. He's at AlexZachary305, and we've got a guest with us this week. It's Nathan Marzion. He's at Nathan Marzion on Twitter as well. He is a Bucks fan, and he also hosts a Bucks podcast, which you can check out on his profile. So we wanted to chat with him before the season starts and just get his thoughts on the upcoming season. So, guys, how are you?
Doing well. I am excited to talk some Bucks basketball, Celtics basketball with you guys. I know it's, again, we're nearing the season. We're kind of getting to that, 1 month to go, getting excited for it. And, yeah, it should be a fun year. I'm hoping our teams can stay healthy and we can eventually meet and kind of – obviously, we're going to have some debates here today, but this thing hopefully can get settled on the court at some point with both teams fully healthy. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Feels like we're overdue after the last couple of years we were expecting and then it didn't happen. So hopefully this is the year it happens.
Yeah. So, I mean, the first thing that we were going to talk about was just kind of the current state of the Bucks and the offseason moves that they've made. How are you feeling, and how are Bucks fans in general? How do you think they're feeling going into this year?
It's there's mixed reactions and mixed feelings about the Bucks right now. I feel like some of us, myself included, are very optimistic. I'm just naturally a very optimistic fan, especially when you have a player like Giannis, a player like Dame, a core like they have. I'm always going to be more optimistic. I'm always going to believe they have a pretty good shot to win. So there's the people that are very optimistic think, hey, last year was just kind of, everything went wrong. It seemed like, and obviously Dame needed a little bit of time to adjust. They had the coaching change in the middle of the season, which kind of threw a wrench in things. There was never that much continuity, and it just took them too long to kind of get gelling, and they were finally getting it going at the end of the year. And then, of course, Giannis gets hurt. Chris was hurt throughout the year. Everything just was off last year. And some of us think, hey, if you have more continuity this year, Dame is better this year. You obviously have, Giannis is going to be Giannis. Chris should be healthy. And you just have a little bit more of that continuity and can, I think they made some good offseason moves. Okay, now we can have a pretty good season this year, and we could be legit contenders again coming up in 2024, 25. But then there's the other side of things where there's the people that say, hey, they're old. It's coming to the end. They're always hurt. Dame might not be Dame anymore. Chris is constantly hurt. Brooke is old. Their bench isn't very good. There's for sure a side that can say, hey, the glass is half empty. And then there's a side that can say the glass is half full. And I think both of those are very valid. I think there's definitely arguments to be made for both sides. Now, again, me personally, and I'm naturally an optimistic fan. I think if you're going to be a fan, you have to be optimistic. Otherwise, what's the point of being a fan? Be even a little bit delusional sometimes. But I do truthfully believe they are going to have, I think they're very underrated right now. I think that obviously with the moves that the Knicks made, getting Mikal Bridges, with the Sixers getting Paul George, and I think people are just kind of forgetting that, hey, when this Bucks team is healthy, they're really, really good. And they are arguably the biggest threat to the Celtics when healthy, and they probably were last year in the East. And so I think, again, the combination of Dame having a full off season of working out and everything. He said last year he didn't really come into the season in shape. He wasn't working out as much last off season out of fear of getting hurt. Having the continuity of not having a brand new coach anymore. You have at least half a season with Doc under your belt. You don't have a totally new team. You just have a few new players. You're going to have, again, Giannis back, Chris healthy. I think this team is in a good position to possibly surprise some people and really open their eyes of like, hey, don't forget about this team. When we're healthy, we are really dang good. And I do think that they're going to be a threat and a real contender and probably the second best team in the East if they can stay healthy.
I agree that I think the Bucks have a higher ceiling than some of the other teams in the East. I think you have more reason to trust them with, proven veterans like a Giannis, with a Dame, with Chris, if he can stay healthy, with the other pieces that they have, as opposed to Philly, who they added Paul George, but you're also counting on Paul George and Embiid, two of the most injury-prone players in the league, to, maintain health throughout not just the season, but a playoff run. Not to mention Embiid's struggles that he tends to have in the postseason just because of his style of play of falling to the ground every play. So I think Giannis plays a much more ethical brand of basketball where he's not just foul baiting every single time and he's not just throwing himself to the floor. The injury that he did have was a little bit flukish. So that's not something, hopefully for his sake, that it's not a recurring injury. With Dame, I think a lot of it, like you said, is just comfort and adjusting to the system. I mean, if you see a big part of what you guys lost in losing Drew, I mean, he was a seamless fit when he got over here, but Dame, it was a big lifestyle change because he had never played outside of Portland before. And then, there's obviously the rumors all off season that he wanted to go to Miami. So it was like whether he was happy there and with his situation with his family. So I actually expect a lot more of the Bucks than a lot of people do. I think they are actually being underrated, like you said, at this moment. But health is a big dependent as well. Like I was thinking in the offseason, they were going to get younger. They were going to get more athletic because some of the big knocking points on the Bucks outside of obviously the injuries that they were older, unathletic, slow. I think someone like a Nick Claxton or someone like that, like down low would have been, big help. I think Gary Trent was a big pickup for you guys. But losing Malik Beasley, it's kind of a wash. I mean, you could say one's better than the other. I don't think one moves the needle that much more over the other, but I think the biggest thing will be health with the Bucks. Because I honestly would trust them more than Philly or the Knicks.
Yeah. So, and you guys talked about some of the roster turnover a little bit with Milwaukee. Some of the guys on the way out, like Patrick Beverley, I guess if you care about that, he is now in Israel. Beasley's now in Detroit. Biggest loss, of course, is Thanasis. I mean, I don't know how you guys are going to get by without him. But they do still kind of have that core group of players that have been there for a while. Like Giannis obviously goes without saying. You still have Bobby Portis, Chris Middleton, Pat Connaughton. And I actually like that they added Taurean Prince, who I like a little bit. He's not going to be like a complete X factor in all likelihood, but he's a good player. He'll help on the boards for sure. And the Trent thing, I like that as well. I think he's an upgrade over Beasley personally. I would say somehow quietly over the last 4 seasons, I was just looking at his stats quietly. Somehow he has averaged over 16 points a game the last 4 years. I know he's been in Toronto, right? So they didn't have a ton going on up there. They also brought in DeLon Wright for whatever that's worth. He played for the Heat, so he'll probably have one of those unconscious nights against the Celtics at some point this year that we'll be extremely frustrated by. Do you think there's any chance of a little bit of a breakout year for Marjon Beauchamp, though, or do you think he kind of is what he is?
No, not me personally, and most Bucks fans I think are a little bit out on him. He had a chance to prove himself several times, and he just has not shown it consistently. He was poor in the summer league this past season when he really should have been dominating as a now 24-year-old in summer league. It's like you should be much better than everyone else, and he at times was bad. And it's like, okay, if you're still bad in summer league against guys that are 5 years younger than you, that's probably a problem. But overall for the roster, I mean, yeah, there's been debates among Bucks fans about, I think the biggest player, with having debates about whether they should be traded has been Brook Lopez. Because obviously, again, same, just like I was talking about with the Bucks, there's obviously the glass half full and the glass half empty. And I think there's a case for both. I think you can say the same about Brook Lopez. He has obviously his limitations. He has the things about him that you say, okay, maybe they should look to move on. But then you look at some of the advanced numbers and you're like, his on-off numbers were so good. The Bucks, when he was on the court, were like a 90-something percentile defense. And when he was off the court, they dropped to like 10th. And really, there were so many things about last season that I think made him look worse on defense than really he actually was. the point of attack defense was terrible. They were constantly getting blown by because they just had no point of attack guard defenders. And then that left Brook kind of on his own to just defend everything at the rim and have a ton of shots going up against him. And it's naturally, I mean, he's not meant to be a high volume defender. It's more of, okay, when guys get to the paint, yes, he's really good at defending that. But if guys are constantly getting to the paint, yes, you're going to score on him sometimes. It's hard to stop that many shots around the rim. And then, of course, he goes against the Pacers in the playoffs without Giannis, which is going to make him look a lot worse, not having that guy next to you that can also defend the rim. And the Pacers are probably the worst matchup possible for a guy like Brook because of how fast they are. So he looked pretty bad in the playoffs on defense. But I'm not willing to just take that 6-game sample and say, okay, Brook, we can't have him anymore. He's bad. We need to trade him. In my opinion, you look at the whole sample of the season, we were much better when Brook was on the court. And I still think he's got a decent amount left in the tank, particularly on defense, and how much he impacts our defense and really helps us around the rim. Like his ability to both protect the rim and space the floor. I know he's not amazing at hitting threes, but for a center, he is. And there's not many centers that you can find that can both shoot 36, 37% from three and also protect the rim at a very high rate. And so I think he's a really good fit around this core. And I think it's someone that, yes, there's a chance they lose him for nothing later, but I think it's worth keeping him around just because of he still has an impact. So I'm in the camp of I'm glad they just kept the top four together. I don't think not many people really thought they were going to, trade. Obviously not trading Giannis. Most people were like, okay, they're going to run it back with Dame. And I think most people agree after the playoffs, Chris should stay around. Chris is still good. Chris had a great playoffs. When he's healthy, he's awesome. Obviously I talked about the injuries, but a lot of the ones last year were very flukish. It wasn't just his body breaking down. It was dumb stuff happening to him. He stepped on KD's foot and missed a month. And then there was one he got hit in the face, and I think he broke a tooth or something, and it was out for a couple of games. It's okay, this isn't really just his body breaking down. This isn't something I'm totally worried about with him. It's more just can he just have a little bit of luck finally and just have a season where he's not having all this stuff kind of happen to him. So I'm glad they kept the top four around. I believe in those guys so much. That's my main reason for belief is just how good this top four is together. And I don't think a lot of people realize that when the Bucks were healthy together last season, they were arguably the best team in the league when they were all on the court together. There was 117 4-player lineups that played 400 minutes last season, and the lineup of Dame, Chris, Giannis, Brook was number one in net rating. So the idea that this isn't really working, this fit doesn't work, it's not true. They fit well together. This core does. They needed to revamp the bench, and I think they did. I think DeLon Wright is definitely better than Patrick Beverley. He's a great point of attack defender. He can run an offense as well. I think he had 119 assists to only 14 turnovers last season. I think Gary Trent's definitely a better defender than Malik Beasley. Not that he's an amazing defender, but he's definitely better than Beasley. And then I think Prince is way better than Jay Crowder was. We saw how poor Jay Crowder was the last couple of years. So I think they did about as good as they possibly could have in free agency, given that they were only working with minimum contracts. So I'm happy with it. The only guy I'm still I wish they would trade is Bobby Portis. I think he's the one guy you can get some value for, that he doesn't really have a great spot right now in this rotation in the playoffs. So other than that, though, I'm feeling pretty optimistic about them keeping their core together and also making some upgrades on the fringes of their roster.
To go back into some of the points that you made, with Brook Lopez, the thing with him is he almost kind of reminds me of a Porzingis, where it's when he's on and he's hitting threes and he's a rim protector, that's what you're looking for out of him. But on the other side of it, when you're facing a Miles Turner or you're facing an Al Horford or you're facing a Porzingis, somebody that can stretch the floor, a big that can stretch the floor, that's where it kind of exposes weakness and his slowness. Because if he's getting out of the paint to try to defend them, where he really doesn't have the speed to do that anyways, that's opening up the paint. And then if he's staying down there, you're just letting, three-point shooting centers just kind of fire away. But with Middleton in the Indiana series, he looked like vintage Middleton then. I remember seeing your post at that, it looked like he turned back the clock in that. And a lot of it is okay, is he really lost a step, or is it just he can't stay healthy? So, a lot of that, we have the same conversations with Porzingis. You even saw him after a month and a half off, game one of the finals, he comes out and scores 20 points in 10 minutes in the first half. So I think the big things with the Bucks is they didn't make any earth-shattering moves this summer. A lot of them were similarly lateral moves with different players. I think this fit is a little bit better with what they have now, but ultimately it's going to come down to the health of their big four. Can they stay on the floor? Some of that due to age, some of that due to injury luck, but I mean, with this Bucks team, like I said, a lot of people, the flavor of the week is the Knicks now, and then the Sixers with Paul George. But I would still take Milwaukee in a series over either one of them if they're healthy. So I like what the Bucks have done. Like you said, there were some bigger expectations, but they did have limitations in how they could acquire it. Brook Lopez wasn't getting to a start of this team. And while Bobby Portis may have more value, he wasn't getting the star as well. You didn't have the draft capital to be able to accumulate that, to be able to bring in another big piece. And then it's what is the big piece? Because, there's only so many mouths you can feed offensively. And then if you get a defensive player that has offensive limitations, it may not help you as well. That's why having somebody or losing somebody like Drew, I mean, not to get into a whole Drew versus Dame debate, because I see that often on your feed, but a lot of what you lost with him outside of like poise and big moments, and not to say that Dame doesn't have that, is that defensively he's just as good, if not better, than he is offensively. And then you don't have to, sometimes you do have to hide Dame against certain defenders. I mean, he tries his best to hold his own, almost kind of like a Kyrie, but he does have size limitations that Drew does not have. So with that, you need other players that can kind of fill in the gaps. That's why you need a rim protector. That's why you need wings that can be physical and that, play or defend well. So like I said, if I had to, you turn off injury mode on 2K and you're ranking all the teams, I probably still would put the Bucks second. But I mean, I feel like they have more risk than some of the other teams. Although if you look at the Knicks, they completely fell apart towards the end of the season. I mean, you added Bridges, who's like an Iron Man. He's almost like a Derek White. He's going to play every single night. But, with Tibbs, you may run everybody into the ground again. So they could probably use some more depth. But I like where the Bucks are at. I'd probably, if I'm ranking them, I'm probably putting them second. I don't think you really, not even from a homerish standpoint, just, the Celtics are the defending champs and they're bringing everybody back. I mean, Porzingis will be out for a little bit. I don't think any objective person can put anybody above the Celtics right now. It's just kind of 2 through 4. I had, Philly, Milwaukee, New York in some order. And then you have like Orlando, Indiana coming. Miami, we'll see what they look like. I think we're going to get into the hierarchy of the East in a little bit. But yeah, I mean, the Bucks offseason, based on expectations, I think they did as well, like you said, as they could have.
Yeah, and I'm glad you guys touched on the Lopez thing, because I was just looking at his numbers, and this is all just statistical stuff, so take that for what it's worth. But he played 79 games last year still and averaged 12.5 points a game and 2.4 blocks a game, and he really wasn't even in the Defensive Player of the Year conversation. And I know that there was that narrative out there while Adrian Griffin was still the coach that the defensive schemes were not what people wanted from Milwaukee. So I think that maybe hurt him a little bit. But and obviously Gobert and Wemby are going to lead that conversation just because they block so many shots too. But the year before, he averaged 2.6 blocks a game, and he was all defensive first team and second in Defensive Player of the Year voting. So like the narrative that he doesn't have anything left in the tank, I think is not true. Like until he proves otherwise, I'm still, ranking him as one of those elite rim defenders. And like you said, if it's a problem where guys are getting blown by on the outside and he has to defend so many shots at the rim, yeah, like his numbers aren't going to look great. But I think he's kind of still going under the radar a little bit. But I mean, with Wemby, like in his second year now, I feel like that race is kind of his to lose. But yeah, I do still appreciate what Lopez does. I wanted to ask your thoughts too, going into the Adrian Griffin thing. So, I mean, they started 30-13 under Griffin and ended up letting him go. I know, like, at least from the outside, there were, like I said, there were the concerns about the defensive stuff, but the record was good. And then they brought in Doc, who I know we'll talk a little bit more about. I guess I just wanted to ask your thoughts and Bucks fans' thoughts about Doc Rivers in general and how they're feeling about the coaching situation.
Yeah, there's so much about the Bucks last season that's like, if you're trying to explain it to someone that didn't like obsess over the team last year, it's hard to really like explain some of the stuff that happened, because you look at it on the outside and you go, you were 31-13, you fire Adrian Griffin, you hire Doc Rivers, who can't even get you to 50 wins, and it's like, it looks like a horrible move. It looks like, what were you doing? And if you watch that team the first few months of the season when they had Adrian Griffin as their coach, it was horrible. And I know they were 31-13. I know they got a lot of wins, but the way they were winning was like, there was no way they were going to win a championship winning that way. They were beating the Wizards 131-127. They would be allowing 120 points a game almost every night. And it was just like, okay, you're not going to be able to win like this throughout. And the defensive scheme was really, really just a disaster. They were playing way too aggressive. And that was, again, part of the reason Brook Lopez, you saw him struggle sometimes. Yeah, was because the defensive scheme under Adrian Griffin did not at all fit how Brook Lopez plays. It did not fit how our team plays because you were playing super aggressive. You were bringing out defenders to like pick up almost near half court. And it's like, we don't have the perimeter defenders to do that. Like, these guys aren't Drew Holiday. They can't do this. And he did not adapt the defense to fit what the team actually was. And again, I know they won a bunch of games, but midway through the season, it was just like, this does not look like it's clicking. You know, Giannis and Dame weren't clicking totally. I mean, they had games here and there, but it just wasn't looking like it was working. And I think the Bucks just said, hey, we need someone in here that has done this before, that we can trust a little bit more, isn't a first-time guy. And they went out and got basically the most experienced guy they could get. And again, obviously the record was a lot worse under Doc Rivers, but a lot of people don't realize they only had, I think it was 5 or 6 games with Giannis, Chris, and Dame all healthy playing the full game. And there's no way you can really expect to be, you know, have a great record and just keep it humming and go, you know, chase the 1 seed when your best players aren't healthy. And that was the biggest thing, was they just were not healthy down the stretch of the season. Chris obviously, again, missed time when he stepped on KD's foot, as I said, and then Giannis gets hurt at the end of the year. Dame missed time in the playoffs and even a little bit of time before the season ended. Like, there was just, it was every game. It was just like, okay, which of the big 3 is out tonight? And it was just, they never could get everyone on the court at the same time. And again, when they did, they still were really good. They had these glimpses of moments where it was like, holy cow, this team could be a juggernaut. I remember they killed the Thunder at home. I think everyone was healthy for that game. They killed the Thunder at home, looked amazing. There was a game they beat the Nuggets by a ton at home. And it was like, okay, this is the Bucks team that we are, you know, that could win a title. And they were starting to get it going. And then again, of course, Giannis gets hurt. They had the game, we were beating you guys by a lot. I know you guys weren't really playing for anything, but then again, Giannis gets hurt. And it's just like every time they took 1 step forward, it was 2 steps back. And that was just the whole season. But as far as Doc Rivers specifically goes, there wasn't like, I was definitely more happy with the team under Doc than I was under Adrian Griffin, even though the record was not the same. When you add the context to it, when you actually watched the defense and how the Bucks were utilizing their best players on offense, it was more encouraging because you could see there was more of a plan. And late in games, they would go to that Dame Giannis pick and roll way more. Like, they would just hammer it. There was a road trip where they were in LA and they played the Clippers and Lakers, I think, back-to-back games. And both of those games were tight late. And the Bucks offense down the stretch of those games was incredible because they just went to the Dame Giannis pick and roll time and time again. And they just generated look after look. And it was, again, like this moment of like, this is what this is supposed to look like. Like, we never saw this under Adrian Griffin. And it was just, it sucked that we couldn't see more of that because of the injuries. But I think under Doc, this team is much better suited than they were under Adrian Griffin. I think pretty much any Bucks fan that watched most of last season would agree with me, despite the record. Now, is Doc Rivers some amazing coach? Is he my favorite coach for the Bucks? No, but I still think he's much better than Adrian Griffin was. I think of the available options that were out there, sure, I guess given his experience, I know his track record of losing in the playoffs, but you can also look at some of those things and say, okay, who hasn't lost with James Harden, Joel Embiid, and, you know, Blake Griffin and those guys in the playoffs, Chris Paul, like pretty much everyone has. So it's not just a Doc Rivers problem. There's things that I can be optimistic about. He's not my number 1 choice. I don't even think he's like a top 10 coach in the NBA right now, but it's like, hey, I think that we're better suited than we were under Adrian Griffin. And to me, that's the whole point. If you're firing a coach to hire another one, you should be better suited. And I think that they are. So
I think a big reason, like you said, is the veteran experience that he had. I think he's not achieved what he probably should have, considering the talent he's had in seemingly every stop. It almost makes you look back at the 07-08 Celtics, like they won, like as an all-time great team, like they won in spite of Doc Rivers, just because of everywhere he's gone. But from everything else you said, though, it kind of reminds me back when Cleveland went to the finals in the first year with David Blatt when LeBron returned to Cleveland, and then they had the best record in the East halfway through the season. They fired him, brought in Ty Lue, and won the championship. So like you said, it's not necessarily the record, it's watching the way things are going, the dynamics. And you also have to wonder if there's any internal conflict. If, you know, Giannis has a big say in that locker room, if he was happy with him, which is also interesting because it seemed really like Adrian Griffin was Giannis's guy, and that's why he got brought in. But maybe once you actually got into the operation and you got into like the games, that things changed a little bit. He might not have been ready for that moment. So hopefully for him, he gets another opportunity. But another thing with the Bucks this past season is, it almost kind of reminds you, to kind of relate it more to the Celtics, is the Celtics the first year with Tatum, when Kyrie got hurt, Gordon Hayward went hurt, and that young team was one game away from the finals. And then you brought Gordon Hayward back, you brought Kyrie back, and that was a team that on paper should have just been like walked to the finals at least, if not won the title, and competed with that Golden State team. And there was too many mouths to feed, there was too many egos. And not saying that's what happened with the Bucks, but they also couldn't stay healthy. And that was a team that just massively underperformed expectations. And you actually beat us in the playoffs that year with and that was just the team that was just like, you watch some games and you're like, this team just like could win the championship. And then there's other games where it's like they look like they don't even want to play. Like that first game in that Milwaukee series where I believe we blew Milwaukee out, and then they win another game the rest of the series, and then every game it just got worse and worse. So with this Bucks team, it's, you got to see what they look like healthy, and then maybe another summer of Doc Rivers, and then with Damian Lillard having another season under his legs in Milwaukee, with Doc Rivers having a full season to coach and prepare, that maybe they will look different. But big thing is, you don't want Brook Lopez playing 79 games. It'd be nice to have another option to go to. Like you said, Beaucamp, maybe the hype around him is dying down, and this is kind of, he is who he is. Andre Jackson looks like, he's someone that could have some potential with you, but it's going to be the offseason acquisitions. If they can at least play up to the standards of, the guys that you had last year, but they're probably going to need more from that, because otherwise you're just counting on Giannis and Dame to carry you for 70, 80 points every single night. I do believe the offense looked a lot better when they went into that pick and roll every single time. And do you believe that's, a Doc Rivers thing, or that was just kind of the way they should have been playing the whole time? And then one more point. Do you believe that Budenholzer deserved to get fired? And do you think you guys would be better off if he was still around?
Budenholzer and Doc Rivers are similar to me. And that's why, like, when they fired Budenholzer, I didn't want Doc, because I was like, he just seems like another Bud, where it's like, he's a fine coach. He can win you some regular season games. I don't trust him in the playoffs. And I know Bud won us a title, but it took a lot for us to win that title. It took Giannis going nuclear, and they barely won it by literally the toenail of KD. So it's like, nobody was like convinced that Mike Budenholzer is this great playoff coach. Look, for this team, the only reason I say Doc is I think they needed a new voice in there. I think they were just a little bit tired of Bud. I think Bud he ran his course in Milwaukee, and he had a great run, a great 5-year stretch where we won a lot of games, we won a title. It was great, but it was time for a new voice, a new chapter. They tried Adrian Griffin, obviously that didn't work. But I think, like, if I had the choice to go back to Bud or go to Doc Rivers, I'm like, I'll take Doc Rivers. I'll take just having a new voice in here, a guy that, and I do truthfully, like, I believe in Doc Rivers' offense more than I do Mike Budenholzer's, because that was another problem with Bud, was he just did not run the pick and roll as much as we wanted. And it was kind of just hand Giannis the ball at the top of the key and, drive and try to make something happen. That's not the best way to create offense. Usually when you have a player like that, it's probably better to get him rolling to the rim, moving towards the rim, and working with him off the ball more. And it's a little bit harder to generate a defense against that. I like what Doc did more with that. Again, you mentioned it. They went a little bit more to the Dame Giannis pick and roll. Not something I want to do 100% of the time, but just doing it more than they did under Griffin, or more than they did under Bud, using Giannis as a screener and off ball. Like, it unlocks several things in your offense, because you're not just giving the ball to one player and just letting everyone kind of swarm that guy. It makes him a lot harder to guard. And I think that's a reason we saw Giannis's percentages go up so much last season, was he's got Dame with him. They're using him in a better way. Doc started using him in a better way, and he's shooting 62% from the field. And every night, just he's efficient, and he almost was impossible to hold under like 50% field goals last year. It only happened a few times. So I'm happy that Doc is the coach compared to Bud. I'm happy that Doc is the coach compared to Griffin. Does that mean I love Doc? No, but compared to the options out there, I'm more happy with it. And just looking at a couple of stats, a couple of things with the defense that really killed the Bucks under Adrian Griffin were fast break points, second chance points, and points in the paint. And, the combination of all three of those being bad is obviously not a good thing for your defense, but they were 23rd in allowing second chance points, 23rd in fast break points allowed, and 25th in points in the paint allowed under Adrian Griffin. Under Doc Rivers, they were 8th in second chance points allowed, 4th in fast break points allowed, and 9th in points in the paint allowed. So they definitely, their defense, you could totally see them get better and really hone in on like, we got to do at least a few things well. We can't, you can't stop everything, but you have to be stopping something. And they started actually making some adjustments and started to stop some things on defense compared to where they were under Griffin, where it just seemed like, okay, you can't guard the perimeter, you can't guard the paint, you can't guard the in transition. Like everything was just bad. And so again, I'm happy compared to the options that were out there. I'm happy that we have Doc Rivers compared to those guys.
Yeah, I want to love Doc Rivers just because personally, like in 2008, as I've told Alex, like I was 10 or 11 years old, like I was a kid. So that's probably like the nostalgia factor is probably part of it too. And obviously, as you guys brought up, like since then, he went on to kind of build this reputation for coaching teams who pretty consistently would blow leads in series in the playoffs. And people's opinions of him have changed a lot. And I also feel like there was sort of that kind of lack of accountability thing down the stretch, which I feel like rubbed people the wrong way. But I do feel like, as you said, like it does seem like it was sort of trending in more of the right direction than people might have perceived. So I feel like it will be better for them this year. I wanted to bring up too. I know you talked a lot about the injuries for a lot of the guys on the Bucks last year, and I guess I kind of wanted to. Well, so I mean, Giannis he actually played his highest number of games since the 2017-18 season, and he played 73. He's going to miss some games at some point pretty much every year. Lillard actually played the exact same amount of games last year as Giannis. And that was the most for him since 18-19. He's 34. Giannis is still somehow only 29. It feels like he's been in the league forever. But those guys and Lopez and Portis are now another year older. Like, do you feel like the injury thing was a freak thing last year and it was just the bug hit them and it's going to be better this year? Or do you have any concerns over those guys like truly being kind of on the downslope a little bit?
There's definitely some concern. I mean, I'm not going to act like there's no chance that these guys are going to get hurt again. Cause yeah, obviously they're getting older. They got a lot of miles on them, particularly guys like Chris, Brook, Dame. I'm not as worried about it with Giannis. Like Giannis have been more freak things. It just seems like last two postseasons, he just at the wrong time, falls in a weird spot. And it just all of a sudden, your season's over. I think, again, Chris, I'm expecting to miss some games naturally. Like Chris is going to miss some games. The thing is, you're not asking these guys. I'm not asking them to be healthy for the whole season. I'm not asking them to be healthy even super consistently. Like even if you miss a month or two in the middle of the season, like be healthy April to June and we can possibly win a title. And if you're not, we're probably not. But if you can just get those guys healthy for a few months, ramp them up a little bit, and then just get them 3 months being healthy, 2 months, I guess it is, like you're going to have a shot. And do I think that there's a decent shot they could all be healthy for that? Yes. And I think Brook, again, we've mentioned Brook's getting old, but Brook hasn't missed many games the last couple of years. He had that back surgery in 2022. And people kind of thought, okay, he's going to be missing games constantly now. But the last few years, he's playing almost every game each season. I just want to look it up really quick. Yeah, he played 78 games in 22-23 and 79 last year. So 7 total missed games in 2 years for Brook. Chris, I said, he might miss some games, but if he can just play around anywhere above 50 and then be healthy in the playoffs, I'm completely fine with that. I expect, again, Dame was pretty healthy for most of last season. He, again, then also had kind of a freak thing in the playoffs. I don't think that was like age. I don't think that was, if it was, I think we would have seen it more often during the regular season. He didn't really get hurt much. And so I do think Dame can be healthy for the most part. And like I said, Giannis will probably be healthy for the most part. So I'm not too worried about it. It's something that can always happen. It's something that when you have an old team, you're always going to have in the back of your mind, like someone could get hurt any game and at any time. Kind of like you guys, with Porzingis, you're going to feel it a little bit. Like even when he comes back, he's a guy that's constantly a little bit hurt. It's a possibility. It's something that you have to worry about a little bit more than another player or another team would. But it's like, at the end of the day, I mean, these guys are athletes. These guys are hopefully going to be in the best condition of their lives. And if you can just get them to April and be near 100% for 2 months, you're going to have a shot to win the title. And that's just, I think there's a shot they can do that. I think it's not completely out of like crazy to assume that they could do that. There's gonna be bumps, I'm sure, throughout, but it's just something you got to hope can work out in the end, and they can power through this thing.
So a big luxury that the Celtics had last year is because they built such a huge lead throughout the season. Is the final month of the season they really could, get themselves prepared for the playoffs. They could start load managing more, managing minutes, and get everything. And then of course Porzingis, right away in the first round gets hurt with kind of another fluke injury. So you can prepare as well as you want, and things can still happen. But like the opportunity that you have by having such a big lead or having playoff positioning is that you don't have to exert yourself into the final game of the season. And like look at Miami, for example, like, yeah, Jimmy Butler's injury was kind of a freak injury while he was trying to foul bait in that game. But if they weren't once again in a playoff game, play-in game, then he's not even playing that game. And then he doesn't get hurt in that situation. So that's why taking the regular season seriously matters. With the Bucks, one thing I wanted to ask you is like, so obviously you look at Dame Lillard, like, I don't think his injuries is necessarily a chronic one, but you look at the history of smaller guards, the way that they age. But with Giannis, it's just because he plays with so much force. Now, the way he injured himself last year with his Achilles or calf, whatever it wasn't through anything through contact, but he plays with such force, kind of going downhill at full speed all the time. He's built like a tank, but how do you feel about him as becoming more, not to say he would be a perimeter player, not like a shooter or anything like that. Like the best part of his game is that force and assertiveness and aggressiveness that he plays with. But and also not to say he's going to become Embiid, but having more that type of style of game would, I think, mitigate risk. Now, he's not like Embiid where he's going to throw himself to the ground every game, throughout, which is a good thing for you guys. But being able to hit up spot up shoes, he doesn't have to hit threes consistently, even like a Brook Lopez, but like being able to hit, an elbow jumper, a three consistently. Like, do you think that part of his game will continue to grow, or do you think this is kind of what it is? He's going to hit one every single once in a while, and that's just who he is.
I could see him getting a little bit better with it. I don't think he'll ever be good at them. I think he has good stretches, and he's gotten definitely better at it. Like, he had a really good year in 2022 with the mid-range jumper. Then he went down the year before, but then last year went back up a little bit. So I think naturally, I mean, obviously you kind of worry about like, okay, how is he going to age again, given how he plays? But I feel like they've been saying that for 3 years now, and it's just like he gets better and better. And last season was probably the best season of his career, honestly. So I think he'll be fine. He's going to probably shoot a few mid-ranges a game. He'll shoot around 38 to 40% on mid-ranges. He'll hit a decent amount of them, keep the defense honest. I like that he cut down on his 3-point attempts last season. That was something that, honestly, he got a little bit, like, he was shooting a little bit too many threes back in like 2019, 2020. I think he was shooting like almost 5 a game-ish. And he cut that down to like 1 something a game last year, which I thought was like very good. It was like, okay, focus on what you're good at, especially now that we have Dame. We have a guy that can take all those threes. Like, you stay mainly down low, you stay rolling to the rim. Again, just focus on what you're good at and dominate. And that's what he did. And so I think he naturally will have to get a little bit more perimeter oriented as he ages. I don't know if we're there yet. I think he can still dominate the way he is for a few more years. Again, I don't think he'll ever be like a really good perimeter player. The free throw stuff is the main way you want him to improve, because he gets to the line so dang much. I want to see him get to like 75 to 80% free throws instead of being 65 to 70. Don't know if we'll get there, but that's my dream, is for him to get there. So it's something that you think he'll make little strides in. He'll have stretches where he's really good at it. He's probably gonna have stretches where he's really bad as well. That's kind of how he's been the last few years. It's just a matter of being able to do it enough to keep the defense somewhat honest. And we see that in games. Like, he will have stretches where he's hitting the 3 ball or he's hitting his mid-range well, and all of a sudden he pump fakes and someone bites on it, and boom, it's kind of crazy that he gets guys to bite on his pump fake sometimes at all. You would think that guys would never do that, but just keeping the defense honest is always something you want from him, and just being able to do it at a decent level, hit those elbow jumpers, hit those baseline jumpers a little bit. I think he'll always be able to do it okay. I don't know if he'll ever be at a great level with it, though.
Yeah. So with all that, and as we talked about, like, to me, the Bucks are still one of the few teams in the East that can at the very least say they have the opportunity to compete for the conference and challenge the Celtics, assuming everybody's healthy, for both teams. How do you feel that the Bucks and the Celtics stack up for a potential playoff series this year?
It is tough to say, because again, we haven't really seen it. And I know we destroyed you guys a couple of times in a regular season last year, but that is not really something you're going to take too much away from. I think, again, I do truthfully believe that when everyone's healthy, we have the best shot to challenge you guys. I thought the same thing last year. I think the same thing this year. Our ceiling to me is higher than the Knicks when healthy. Our ceiling is higher than the Sixers when healthy. And I just think we're the team that's closest to you guys when we're all healthy. Now, if I'm a betting man, would I probably pick the Celtics right now? Yes. I mean, again, like Alex said, any rational person is probably going to say, hey, the Celtics are the favorites. The Celtics should be the favorites. There's not much reason to think they wouldn't be. But ultimately, I mean, it's very interesting because you guys have the wings, and we've always had a tough time defending wings. We haven't really found a great wing defender in the last few years. That's been a thing we've wanted since PJ Tucker left, is like, who's going to guard if we go against KD? Who's going to guard KD? Who's going to guard Tatum? A reason Tatum went off against us in that game 6 in 2022 was he's got George Hill and Pat Connaughton defending him. And it's like, it's not a recipe for winning. So that's been something we've kind of been searching for. I like that, again, Gary Trent's closer to that. He's not a great defender, but he's definitely more average. He's closer to being a pretty good defender. DeLon Wright, having him as a point of attack defender. Taurean Prince, those guys that we brought in are all just better defenders than what we had before. I think they're at least capable, or they're at least guys you can trust to make things at least a little bit difficult on an opposing wing like that. The matchup that's always interesting, obviously, is who's defending Giannis, and I think you guys used to have one of the things, like, people always say, do you regret trading Dame and giving the Celtics Drew, blah, blah, blah. I believe in this current Bucks team against your Celtics team right now more than I did with the Drew Bucks against the Celtics of 2023, because we saw that Celtics team destroy the Bucks in a regular season constantly, and just the Bucks it seemed like the Celtics always had the Bucks number. They had the game where they beat us by like 40 in Fiserv Forum. There was the game where everyone was out and we still ended up in overtime against you guys, even with Tatum and Brown and guys hurt. Sam Hauser hit a 3 to take it to overtime. So back in 2023, when we had Drew, I just did not have much confidence in the matchup. It was like the Celtics were so comfortable against us. They could do whatever they wanted, it seemed like, against us. Now, I just feel like there was something last year where it was like the Celtics don't have quite as much of a mojo against us, and they just don't seem as confident playing the Bucks as they did before. Dame had some good games against the Celtics. Giannis, I just think they have a hard time defending Giannis. And you lost Grant Williams, you lost Marcus Smart, who were two very good Giannis defenders, just because they flop a lot. Let's be honest. That's one of the best ways to defend Giannis, is to flop. And you brought in Drew, who's obviously a great defender, but isn't going to flop quite as much. I think he has a harder time going one-on-one against Giannis. So I just think, and even Porzingis, I don't think Porzingis is really great at defending Giannis overall. He's going to have some moments. He's going to have some blocks. He's obviously can protect the rim pretty well, but I think Giannis, likes that matchup. And I think Giannis is comfortable in that matchup compared to when he was going against Horford a lot, or Marcus Smart, or Grant Williams. I think those guys they got in his head a little bit just because he was afraid of the flops. He was afraid to drive on them. He just wasn't comfortable. I think that now that matchup is interesting because that's always a thing when the Bucks play in a playoff series, is if you don't have someone to stop Giannis, and the Bucks have easily the best player in the series at that point, okay, it becomes a lot harder to beat them, because it's usually the team with the best player in the series, especially if it's by a long shot, is going to end up winning the series. And I know Tatum's good, but when Giannis is at his best, he's a lot better than Tatum. So that's the thing. And I kind of always come back to that of like, hey, who's stopping him? Like, who's stopping Giannis, or at least containing him? And if you can't, are you going to be able to make up for it enough with your, 2 through 5 compared to our 2 through 5 that you can end up winning the series? You very well could, because you have the best 5 in the game, top 5 in the game. But it just makes things interesting if you're not really able to, if you don't have a great plan for stopping Giannis.
So for me, with the matchup, as opposed to who guards Giannis, most of the time it probably will be Al Horford. They use him more against like the brute centers, like an Embiid, a Giannis. Like, no one's going to stop him, but he's going to make him work a lot more. He's going to wear him down. If you saw the matchup, 2 years ago when they played in the playoffs, like Al Horford would be the best option. I'm sure Drew will get the assignment a little bit. Porzingis isn't really the best option to guard Giannis. He's more of a finesse center. I mean, he's going to get a lot of blocks at the rim, but it's not going to be like if someone like Giannis is going to back him down, he's going to wear him out going through him. The biggest problem the Bucks have, like you mentioned as well, with the Celtics is the wings, is the athletic wings on the perimeter, and that they can't seem to defend them. And the Celtics have players, like 5 players, actually 6 if you go to Horford, that are near elite or above average on both ends of the floor, where they're really kind of the only team in the NBA that has that at the level that they have that at. So for me with the matchup, it's you mentioned that Giannis is the best player. I remember you did a rundown last year before the season, and you're going, you're like, I'll take Giannis over Tatum. I'll take Dame over Jalen. You're like, congrats on having like the better 5-man, whatever, when we got down that far. I mean, I think basketball is not really played on paper like that. I mean, I've had other people, make those comparisons as well when they start comparing, like it's 5 one-on-ones, where it's more about how they play in a system, how they play with the team. And the Celtics are kind of the sum of the parts are greater than, like, the whole of it is better than the individual parts. And not that these are not great players that the Celtics have. I just like the cohesiveness of the unit and the way everybody fits in their role on both ends of the floor. Like, they can switch everything defensively. Every single person offensively can beat you from all 3 levels of the game. So I think that's what makes the Celtics just such a different level than everybody else. Now, as you mentioned, Giannis would be potentially the best player in the series. That doesn't mean that somebody on a given night like Tatum in Game 6 in Milwaukee can't be the best player on the floor that night. So it's
Hey,
not
let's
like the
hold
best
on,
player.
really quick. Giannis was the best player on the floor that night, but go off. Okay.
I mean, it
Hey,
depends how
they
you
were
look
both they
at
were
it.
both
Like,
they were both great. They were both great. I'm not trying to sound like Tatum wasn't great too, but Giannis had like 44 and 20 that game. So
he had big numbers for sure, but I mean, like, if you're looking at the impact of the players that they had, like every single big shot, and like you knew who was getting the ball. It's just the way that they play is different because one's more of a perimeter type of player. I mean, Tatum can do more, but perimeter is really what he like kind of makes his name on. But we actually had a fan question that I wanted to get into with that as well. I believe I don't have it in front of me. I think it was Malik Threesley. Feels like if Middleton was healthy that series, do you think the Bucks would have won that series?
I mean, it's tough to say no. Now, I don't even like talking about it because it's all hypotheticals. You can do this for every series. If you have guys hurt, you have guys hurt. I'm not going to act like the Bucks should have won. Now, could they have won if Middleton was healthy? Yes. I mean, naturally, when you take a team to 7 games, you're up 3-2 without who was our second best player at the time. Yes, I believe that with Middleton, they win that series. They probably close it out in 6. I still think it would have gone 6. I still think it would have been a very tough series, at least 6. But you just look at that series and you say Giannis just didn't have the offensive help he needed. Like, he was going crazy, and it was just nobody could really step up in those final few games. And I think they shot, it was 6 of 39, 6 of 29 in Game 6 from 3, and 4 for 33 in Game 7. And and it just was another reason why you look at that series and say that's another reason why you just kind of had to make the Drew trade. Not that Drew's not a great player, but anytime someone got hurt, he was not fit to step up a level offensively. Whereas obviously, Dame, someone like Dame is, he can step up and be a 30-something point per game scorer when needed. But Drew just wasn't able to kind of carry the weight that he needed to offensively. He's much better suited for a team like the Celtics right now, where he can be a 4th, 5th guy when needed and kind of just take spot up threes and focus on a little bit more on defense, be more of a cutter. Like, he's in a perfect role with you guys. And I honestly am very happy for Drew that like he found that perfect role, because it just kind of sucked where you'd watch series like the Bucks Celtics series and it makes you question, like, is Drew Holiday even good? Because you just watched him kind of stink it up on offense for a while. And it was like, he's very good, but this isn't really how he's meant to be played. He's not meant to be a number 2 option shooting 20 shots a game. And so again, I'm very happy he found that role with you guys. I wish he, was with another team, but yeah. Anyways, with that series, it's just, they didn't have the offense, and Chris would have provided that offense. And I think Chris at that time was a better defender than he is right now, and could have at least made it a little bit tough on Tatum in Game 6. And man, I think about that Game 6 a lot, man. It haunts me. It haunts me. I was there. It was brutal, and it hurts.
The closest comparison I have to that is, I mean, and Tatum's better than Middleton, but like when the year after that, where we're down 0-3 to Miami, and then we come all the way back, the Derek White tip, and I was at that game here in Miami, to have all that momentum, go to a game 7 at home, and to have Tatum get hurt the first play of the game. Like, for me, like, everyone brings up, like, well, they played like crap after, and Tatum was still in the game. That took all the momentum away. That took all the energy out of the building. Tatum was a shell of himself. He could barely move. And for me, it's like that hypothetical. Like, I think if Tatum doesn't get hurt, we win that series. Who knows if we would have beaten Denver? That's another thing. Like we mentioned, the last couple of years, we were expecting to play you guys. The last 2 years, it could have been Celtics Nuggets in the finals, and we didn't get it either year. Due to different circumstances. So unfortunately, injuries are part of the game. The more well-rounded you are of a team, and the style of play and the age of your players has a lot to do with it. But at the end of the day, sometimes it's just shit luck with the way things happen. Like what happened with Giannis last year with the calf and the Achilles. Was expecting him back at the end of that Indy series. Maybe if they got through that series, he would have been back for the next round. But here's to hoping that everyone can stay healthy for this next playoff run, so we can get really see where everyone's at.
Yeah, and I know you guys talked a little bit about Drew too. I feel like between the three of us, we probably could all talk about Drew Holiday for another 50 minutes or however long we've been on so far. I feel like I still see that steal on Andrew Nembhard in the Indiana series. That gives me chills. I'm so glad that we got the full Drew experience. And this is not to rub it in, like you said, obviously you wish he was somewhere else. It's just to point out and this is something that people said about Marcus Smart too. You just don't really fully appreciate what he does unless you watch him every single night. And you watched Drew for a long time, and now we're getting to do that too. And obviously it paid off for Boston. I know we wanted to talk about the rest of the East too. I mean, I know we've been on a while. Do you guys want to hit on that stuff too?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
One point I want to make real quick about Drew is he's like Marcus Smart in the way of he'll just do all the little things, all the stuff that doesn't show up in the stat sheet, but he seems more poised in those big moments. He just made every single winning play down the stretch. He had the basket to go ahead against Indiana in game 3. He had the steal. He made the free throws. He had the rebound at the end of game 4 to give him a second chance to run out the clock. It just seems like he's just ready for those moments, and he will take the shot, but Marcus Smart would get very, very trigger happy, and it was Marcus Smart time at the end of games. That game 7 against Miami, the one we won where we went to the finals, where the final 3 minutes, every single possession ended in a Marcus Smart 3, and we almost coughed that game up because of it. As much as I love Marcus Smart, that's the Drew Holiday difference is you're not having, it's Marcus Smart time at the end of games.
And
People forget that the Derek White tip-in was a Marcus Smart pick.
Yeah.
And I loved Marcus Smart. I was a huge Marcus Smart fan. I still, as with the Drew Nembhard steal thing, I still see that game against the Rockets with James Harden, where he took those 2 charges. Marcus Smart took those 2 charges down the end of that game. And I remember clear as day, Cedric Maxwell on the radio broadcast, he said something like, "Take that with your beard." And I just thought that was the funniest thing in the world at the time. Yeah, that was awesome. But yeah, Nathan, sorry, I cut you off.
No, I was just gonna say, yeah, and Drew, you talked about him in the clutch moments and stuff like that, and kind of being ready for the moment. Yeah, he is weirdly a good clutch shooter. Because again, that was the thing with the Bucks is he'd have these playoff games where he's literally shooting 4 for 20, and he pulls up for a clutch 3, and you're like, no, and then it would always go in, and you're like, okay, let's go, Drew's ready for that. And it was he had several moments like that where even I know he did it defensively. You mentioned the couple plays he had defensively with the Celtics. He obviously had the steal in the finals with the Bucks, then the oop to Giannis. He had the steal against you guys in game 5 of that series. The 2 steals, actually. He had the block save off of Marcus Smart, and then the steal on Marcus Smart in that game as well to clinch it in game 5. That was so fun, man. That was one of my favorite Bucks games, and then followed by my least favorite Bucks game. But
reverse.
Yeah, he's definitely a clutch player, and again, it was just it's crazy thinking back to some of those games because it was there were just several moments where, like I said, it'd be he's having a disaster of a game, and he just somehow makes plays at the end that you're like, holy cow, and he goes from being the scapegoat, this guy cost us our season, to holy crap, this is the most this is the best player, he's so impactful, and he's so great. And it just was a roller coaster of emotions with Drew when he was on the Bucks. Mostly good and then sometimes bad, but it was definitely fun having him on the team.
Kind of reminds you of the Marcus Smart experience that the Celtics fans experience as well, where it's Marcus Smart was the king of the no, yes 3 that he would take. Then Marcus Smart, he sees 2 threes go down in a row. The next one's a Steph Curry heat check 4 seconds into the shot clock. So, someone you love. But like I said, I just think the level of poise on the stretch from someone like Drew Holiday, where, like I said, he will take the big shot, but he doesn't have to be. He's going to defer to Tatum. He's going to defer to Brown, and he'll still just make all the winning plays. So love having Drew here. Thank you indirectly to the Bucks.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, we're
No,
thankful to have him.
Can we
Yeah,
talk
Nathan.
briefly? Can we talk just briefly about, like, obviously I get a lot of, would you do the Dame trade again? I would definitely do the Dame trade again. And I think it worked out well for everyone. We needed to move on. We needed to try to raise our ceiling. We needed to get someone in here that could really boost us on offense. You guys obviously ended up with Drew. It helped you guys. It helped Drew. He had found the perfect role. Like, can we agree this helped everyone involved? I know it doesn't seem like it helped the Bucks because we obviously lost and you guys won and everything, but like, in my opinion, the Bucks were not winning again with the core that they had before when you had Drew, Giannis. Like, to me, you lose with Dame, Giannis, Chris. Okay, you weren't going to win with Drew, Giannis, Chris, in my opinion. And so it's like we have a better chance now than we did before. You guys obviously are better now. Drew's better now. Like, can we find a common ground here and be like, hey, the Drew Dame trade was good for everyone involved?
I do agree with you. I mean, Dame talent wise, like, is obviously an upgrade over Drew. Like, you will take that 10 times out of 10. It's probably just going to take that extra season of them meshing to really like find their groove and turn into what they should be with that level of talent. And yeah, I mean, it definitely helped us. So we're not upset. Like, it's just a matter of whether it helped y'all. So
yeah.
I think
mean,
what
again,
it did for the Bucks is it raised the ceiling higher and it lowered the floor a little bit. Like, I feel like it elevated you to a level where you may be more of a championship contender, but another first round exit or like early on in the playoffs could occur as well if things don't go right as well. Especially since, as great as he is on offense, he's not the defensive player that Drew Holiday is, or not even like close to that. So that can hurt you on the other end of the floor. But I'm happy with the trade. So not to dunk on you. I mean, like I said, I saw some posts where it was like Drew Holiday's stat lines were shooting, but I feel like he got better in the regular season over the course of the season, and he got better in the postseason over the course of the postseason. So he definitely earned his stripes here in Boston.
Yeah, because as the postseason, I remember when he started, like the first series and a half, he was struggling, and it was like, this is playoff Drew again. Here we go. And then he found his groove. He started playing really well, playing perfect in that role. And again, I hate the like apples to apples comparisons people make, because it's like, no, like, he is playing a different role in Boston. He's playing a much better role that's more suited for him. He's gonna have fewer disaster type games compared to where at the Bucks, where he was shooting 20 times a game. He was taking a lot of off the dribble threes and really having to be a creator. And it's like, you can't really compare them. Like, and that's why we made the Dame trade, is we couldn't have him playing that role anymore and be successful. It was like, we got to try something else. And like you said, it probably lowered our floor a little bit, but it raised the ceiling. And to me, when you're a contender and when you're a team with Giannis and with Middleton and a team that's kind of like, you got to capitalize on it right now, you got to kind of do everything to raise that ceiling, even if it might not work, even if it doesn't, if the Bucks don't win the title this year, don't win the title next year, whatever, I don't think I'll ever regret them going all in, going for it and saying, hey, like, we're trying to win another title here. And I think it raised our ceiling enough that I'm like, hey, I'm fine taking the shot, even if it doesn't work out.
So with all that, the rest of the East, outside of the Bucks and Celtics, who do you look at as like the biggest contenders? Who scares you the most as a Bucks fan, like outside of the Celtics?
Indiana.
It is not Indiana. No, Indiana is there. I feel like Indiana is fine, but they're not. They had a good year last year. They had our number, all that, but I think they're going to come back down to earth a little bit. I think the Bucks will be ready for them next season. Not totally worried about them. I still think they're young. They don't have like the top end talent that some of these other teams have. So they'll be in the middle of the pack. Like you said, they're kind of with the Magic, and they're kind of like, okay, they're coming, they're there, they're in the mix, but they're not really a team you're like confident, oh, I'm putting them in my top four. I think the top four for sure in any order is Boston, Milwaukee, New York, Philly. To me, I'm more afraid of New York than I am Philly, because I can't do it again with Philly. I can't, this is every year that it's like, Philly could be dangerous. Philly's good. Joel Embiid. Oh, now they got Paul George, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, I feel every year it's kind of the same. Everything kind of falls apart at the end. Joel Embiid gets hurt or he disappoints in the playoffs. He has a disaster of a last game usually, and they end up losing. And it's like, okay, why did we believe something different would happen? I know they got Paul George, great move, but like we saw last season, this stuff doesn't just gel perfectly right away. We saw it with the Dame trade. Like everyone kind of right away with Bucks got Dame, and it was like, they're going to the finals. Yep, they're the favorite in the East. And it's like, hey, it doesn't always work exactly as you plan immediately, and it might take some time. You might need to be patient with it a little bit. Having three kind of ball dominant players like that, not sure it's totally going to work. We'll see. Having two guys, Paul George and Joel Embiid, that have a history of both choking in the playoffs and getting injured when it matters, not like a duo that I'm totally going to get behind. So I have plenty of doubts about Philly. I don't have as many doubts about New York. I feel like New York is much safer. Philly might have a slightly higher ceiling, but I don't think it's enough that like the difference in their floors to me is much greater than the difference in their ceiling. So I'm going to say New York is my team that I'm more afraid of. Their depth is just, they have so much depth, and there's just so many guys that can beat you on that team. Their defense is really good, and there's plenty of guys on that team that I think are just like tough playoff type players. So if we're in a playoff series against them, like to me, you play against New York and you just know like this is going to be a grueling, tough, physical, grinded out series. Against Philly, there's a chance you're going against a team that has there's a good chance you're going against a team that has an injured Embiid, Paul George that's disappointing in the playoffs again. I like Maxey, but I don't know if I love their depth. So it's like there's just way more question marks with Philly to me that I'm going to definitely say I think New York would be my, outside of Boston, in my next best like contender, my next team that I'm most afraid of.
Yeah, I'll never trust Philly. With Philly, it's like you got to show me before I can have any belief in you. Like you said, every single year, it's kind of like spin the wheels on it. It's another team to get excited about. Like this is the year with Philly, and then they're like, well, it's because Embiid wasn't healthy. Well, he's never healthy, and it's not by luck. It's he's a big man. The way he plays, where he's throwing himself to the ground, trying to bait calls all game long. And it's like, that's why Horford's so successful against him. Yeah, he's going to get his numbers, but Horford's going to make him work for it all game. So he's going to be tough with him. He's going to be physical with him. He's going to make him fall to the ground. And so then by the end of the fourth quarter, he's gassed. So if he can't get calls to get to the free throw line, he's just useless on offense. The last 4 minutes, if you remember the second round, not this year, the year before when we played Philly, where we're down 3-2 going to Philly, and Philly's up by, I think, 1 or 3 with about 4 minutes left. And the difference between Tatum and Embiid over the final minutes, where Tatum took over that game and Embiid's not even asking for the ball.
Yeah.
And when he gets it, he's getting doubled. He doesn't know what to do with it. Like, he's just so gassed because he's been like throwing himself to the ground all game.
Let's call it like it is.
He's never in shape. He can never stay healthy. And because he doesn't change the way he plays, where it's like his free throws are such a big part of his game. Granted, he can hit them, but he's getting the calls. But like he's doing that by flopping all game long. That's why he can never maintain his health or, his play style down the stretch. But for me, I agree with you with that. I think New York is the much safer pick. I think their floor is significantly higher than Philadelphia. Like Philadelphia in those series, like they're going to have 2 of the best 3 players. But are they going to have 2 of the best 3 players? Are Embiid and PG-13 still going to be healthy? Like I think Jalen Brunson's injury at the end of the year was a fluke. Obviously, the broken hand at the very last game, and that team was just completely off the rails at that point. It's probably better we got Indiana. We got a much better series, even though it was a sweep. Like New York would have had nobody left if they had managed to get through that. But I agree with you with the tiers. I would actually put Boston in a tier of its own right now, not to be disrespectful to the other teams, but I just think being the champion and bringing the entire team back. Granted, you'll be without Porzingis for a duration of time, but we actually start the season with a much lighter schedule this year, so I don't think it's going to really affect us much in the standings. I would have Philly, Milwaukee, and New York in the next tier. I think, like you said, Orlando and Indiana's in a tier. I would put Cleveland in there as well with Mitchell. Miami's the oddball. I don't know where they're going to be. I think their ceiling is higher, but their floor is very, very low. It's what type of Jimmy Butler you're going to get. It's in a contract year this year, so he might have extra motivation. But, he's always doing a side quest throughout the season, riding horses through Miami or being a celebrity at other events. So we'll see how motivated he really is. I can see that team, if they start off really slow, like with him being in a walk here, potentially being a trade target at the deadline, if Miami's going to move in a direction of getting somebody around Bam Adebayo's timeline. So I don't really know what to make of them. I think all that fear of Miami was majorly overblown because of one playoff run where everybody got hurt the whole way and Miami just kind of had like devil's magic working on their side. I think they are more of what they've been the last 2 years, which is a playoff team, that they may have a higher ceiling, but I don't think they're that great. So for me, like I said, I have the Celtics 1. I would personally put Milwaukee 2, but I think this will be a much more competitive season. I don't think the Celtics are going to win the East by 15 games this year, but I would still pick them at this point to win it. The one thing I will say, though, is the first couple months when you don't have Porzingis, your big man rotation is Al Horford, and then you're going to have Luke Cornett, you're going to have Tillman, you're going to have Neemias Queta. Al Horford's, getting close to 40 right now. Like, they're not going to want to burn him out. He already doesn't play back-to-backs, and they're not going to extend his minutes in the nights Porzingis is out. So they're going to have a thinner rotation up front. So that's where it could hurt them. But the main thing is getting, the top 6, top 7 available for the playoff run. That may cost them a game or two during the season. Although I really like our bench. Your boy Sam Hauser has really developed into quite the player and fit his role in the rotation. Pritchard, the Lonnie Walker addition, I think is, a big steal considering they got him for basically nothing. Like, he could have gone anywhere. There's a lot of contenders that could have really used him, and now he's like our 9th man. So if he sticks around, I think he could be really big if you try to give, Drew and D White some rest because, they played deep into June, then they played in the Olympics. So I think Lonnie Walker could have his time to shine if he sticks around. But, yeah, I think this is going to be a fun season. It's going to be very competitive this year. There's a couple of dog shit teams at the bottom, but I think everybody else is going to be kind of in the mix.
Yeah, I feel like the Eastern Conference playoffs, as easy, quote unquote easy, as they were for the Celtics last year, I feel like it's going to be a dogfight this year because I feel like everybody's going to be gunning for them, especially with all those guys coming back from injuries too. And I just think they're going to want to prove something that they are, these other teams are going to be, like I said, really gunning for the Celtics.
I think it's been since 2000. I think the Warriors in 2017 were the first or the last team to get back to the conference finals after winning the finals the year before. Like, I don't think any team hasn't gone, like, nobody's gone back to back, let alone I think most teams or every team since 2017 hasn't even made it back to the conference finals the year after winning the finals. It just shows how hard it is at the year after to really keep it up. As you said, playing deep into June and just having that target on your back, it kind of just catches up to you. And the Celtics might be good enough to just blow past that and say, screw it. We're the team that's going to, break that streak. But it is tough. Again, I saw it firsthand with the Bucks in 2022, where it was like, guys get gassed, guys get hurt, and you have a target on your back. Teams are gunning for you. And it's just like every night, it feels like you're getting everyone's best shot.
One quick point to that before I go back to you, Ryan, is that I think the Celtics have a lot of advantages that some of those other teams didn't have. They're bringing everybody back, and the majority of the team is on the younger side of 30. But a big advantage that they're going to have that a lot of the other teams did not have is the level of motivation that I feel like they're going to have. You have Jaylen Brown, who got left off all the NBA teams, all the defensive teams, wasn't invited out to Paris to be on the Olympic team. You have Jason Tatum that kind of got dragged along in Paris, really didn't get to play. So I feel like there's an added level of motivation there to go with also the monkey off the back of particularly Tatum that was getting, a lot of crap the last few years about, not having won a title, even despite his age. And then I think Joe Mazzulla now is going to be even more confident in his abilities because, like, after his first year, people were calling for his job. He wasn't ready for this role. And I think he's clearly proven that, and the whole team has bought into him. So I think they're going to have a lot of advantages the other teams didn't have. But like you said, you need kind of a little bit of luck as much as talent to get through the grind of the season and the playoffs. So they were fortunate with health, short of they lost Porzingis for the majority of the postseason. It didn't really affect them, but a second time around it could. So we'll see with that. But I like our chances. But like I said, there's a lot of teams gunning for them. They already were, but now it's even bigger.
Yeah. So, and we kind of talked about this before we started, before we went live, but are we able to take like fan questions, Q&A here? Are there any other questions, that you saw, Alex?
I don't have access to that. Oh, you mean, what they were asking before?
Oh, no, sorry. I thought, never mind. I thought Red said we were going to be able to see, the comments, but I'm not sure. So I wasn't sure about that, but anyway, I feel like we kind of hit on everything that we said we were going to talk about. Was there anything that you guys wanted to bring up outside of that?
Ooh, okay. How would you guys compare Chris Middleton versus Kristaps Porzingis as overall players? Because I feel like I get a lot of flack, and I got a lot of flack before the season for saying Chris is as good, probably, or they're around the same. Chris, you could argue, is better. You could argue Kristaps is better, but I feel like Celtics fans took that as like, how in the world could you ever say that Chris Middleton's better than Porzingis? And to me, it's like they're both hurt quite a bit. Chris is better on offense. Kristaps is better on defense. Chris is, I think, the better playoff performer. I don't know. I wanted to get your guys' take on those two players.
I think they're very, very different type of players, so it's hard to compare when you look at it like that. I feel like it's a ceiling versus a floor question, where I think without Middleton, it's really hard for Milwaukee to compete at the level of a championship contender. Because I think the Celtics are a deeper team of higher end players, where it's like Giannis. Then Milwaukee may have the best player in that series in Giannis, but without Middleton, I feel like they don't really have a shot, especially against like a Celtics in the playoffs, especially the current iteration of the Celtics. Whereas Chris Middleton's almost like not Chris Middleton. Chris Middleton's like a high end item, whereas like Kristaps Porzingis is like a luxury item. Like he almost is like a cheat code for us. Can we win? Like you run the same postseason back without Kristaps Porzingis, could we still win the championship? Yes, but he takes us to a level that just elevates us to a level that when we're at our best with Porzingis, it makes us very, very difficult to beat. And you mentioned offense versus defense, but I think it's Kristaps Porzingis' offense that makes it so difficult to beat, because you have a 7'3" guy that can stretch the floor to 30 feet. The mid-range, like the big difference, and especially against Miami, which is what I was looking forward to most with Porzingis when we got him, is what would happen when Miami threw that like junk zone against us. Is we just had no idea what to do. We were just shooting contested threes or trying to drive into a collapsing paint, and we just turned the ball over. And then you look at the way we played. You throw it into him at the top of the key, 7'3". He can shoot over anybody. He can see over everybody. So if you don't double him, he's going to shoot from there, and he's very, very efficient from the top of the key. If you do double him, then he can see over everybody, and there's going to be somebody open, and you're going to have floor spacers all around. So I feel like it's a ceiling versus a floor thing, whereas Middleton's more of a necessity item. Like you need to have him to be at the level that you want to compete in as a team. Whereas Porzingis, we can win without him. He just puts us at a level where it's like, not to say that we're the 17 Warriors or anything like that, but we get to a level that on paper, at least, we should be the favorites in every single series we go into. So I didn't really answer your question of who's better. I think it's just different.
Yeah. No, I get it.
Alex, you said a lot of pretty much what I was going to say. Like, I feel like they're kind of apples and oranges. Like, it's so hard to compare guys that are that different. But I feel like Porzingis, the difference is like Porzingis is almost kind of like that secret weapon where like if you have him, they just go so much farther beyond what they were before. I feel like Middleton doesn't quite get the Bucks to that level, but he, as Alex said, like he raises their floor so much that like he obviously is extremely important too. And it's not to say either one of them is necessarily better than the other. I feel like they're really, really hard to compare, but we did get a question in the chat, and I'm not sure if the question is like all time or just who's better, or but it came from Nick, and it says KG or Giannis. So I don't know if that's like who would you take all time or whatever.
The only power forward I'm taking all time over Giannis is Tim Duncan. Giannis has passed Dirk, and I think he just is barely past Kevin Garnett. All time. I think they're very close. If you want to say Kevin Garnett is slightly ahead of him, I'm not going to argue too much, but yeah, to me, Giannis has now passed every power forward except for, I guess Karl Malone could be on there too, even though he's canceled, but Karl Malone and Tim Duncan, I guess, are the two that I'll put above Giannis all time. I think they're close. Giannis, Dirk, and KG are all like in the same realm, but I think Giannis is a little bit past those guys as of now.
I'd say KG's a fairer comparison because there's more similar in the style that they play. I mean, KG became more of like, not like Al Horford, but more as he got older, like more of a jump shooter, finesse type of player, whereas Dirk Nowitzki was a shooter, was a finesse type of player, where I think Giannis is more brute force. And that's why I think for his game to age better, he's going to have to develop more of a consistent jump shot. It's going to save him, the injury risk, and I think it create longevity for him.
Yeah, and again, this kind of goes back to what we were saying with Middleton and Porzingis. Like they kind of just play so differently. Like KG is kind of that traditional like power forward, like in that mold of Dirk, Tim Duncan, and all those guys that you just mentioned, who are like posting up and taking these like little fadeaways from the block and like doing all these things that guys don't really do anymore. Whereas Giannis, like he's positionally like listed as a power forward or center, whatever you want to call him, but he's so ball dominant. He plays like a wing in transition. Like he's so much of a different player that they're really hard to compare. I'd have to do a statistical deep dive to have an opinion on who I think is better all time, because I haven't looked at them like head to head like that. I'd love to do that, and I can at some point, and maybe we'll get back to that. But I don't know if I can, like, I mean, I'm biased. Like, I would take KG just because, again, going back to the 2008 thing, like it's a nostalgia thing. I love Kevin Garnett. Paul Pierce is my favorite Celtic of all time. Kevin Garnett is right up there. So
to me, and obviously they're different. When talking about guys all the time, I'm looking, mainly at the accolades, what they've accomplished. I mean, I know Giannis has a couple more first team All NBAs. They both have an MVP. They both have a Defensive Player of the Year. Giannis had a playoff series or playoff performances, I think, better than KG's ever had. Like, they're both great two-way players. I think Giannis, as you said, he's more positionless. I think he can do more on the court as far as, or I guess I don't want to say he's not, because he can't shoot or anything, but I think you could put him in several different positions on the court compared to KG. He's not just like he doesn't fit into one mold. And to me, if you're starting a team, I'd rather have Giannis on my team than KG, like all time. Like, I feel like Giannis as my best player, I feel pretty dang good as like we're going to have a shot to win a title every single year. Whereas KG, I don't know if I'd feel the same way.
I think one thing that KG does have an advantage on is the culture. He created that in Boston when he came over. That was as much of his talent and his ability. It was a big reason they won the championship. Like, that whole culture changed when he came there. And that was a big thing. And if you're starting the foundation of a team, but you got to think of, you know, are you drafting him? What age are you drafting him at? Because that could also make a big difference as well. I have one quick question, just because we've already gone very long on this. I know it's all accolades and stuff, but whose career, if Nathan Marzian could be one of these players and you're just retiring at the end, whose career would you rather have, Damian Lillard or Drew Holiday?
As of now, Drew, for sure. I'd rather take the titles. I'd rather take contributing to a couple of championship teams. Now, give me 1 year, and I think I'll take Dame, because I'll take the one title that he's going to win in 2025, along with everything he accomplished before that. So that was my sneaky way of saying that the
going to the
Bucks were
Celtics at the deadline.
No, I mean, it's an interesting question though, because it's like, and I think it was more fair like this time last season, where you'd be like, okay, Drew's got the one title, and whereas Dame doesn't have the title, but he's done more just as far as scoring and being a number one on a team and everything like that, carrying teams and putting up huge performances. After Drew got the second title, you're definitely taking two titles as a key contributor on both of those over having no titles. But I think if Dame can get one as a number two, as a huge, 25 plus point per game contributor on a title team, I think that can be something that it becomes a conversation. It becomes like, okay, I might take the one being a huge contributor compared to, one being a top 3 guy and one being like a top 5 guy. So it's a good question though. Like, and I think it'll get very interesting if Dame can win a title here.
Another thought to that,
make a difference for sure. Like the championship absolutely changes the conversation, because Dame, like, he just was in that kind of purgatory in Portland for so long, where like he was so dominant and hit so many big shots, but really was never going to go anywhere. Whereas now, if he gets that ring, that definitely makes it a conversation for sure.
Or if one of his SoundClouds goes platinum, then that could elevate him too.
Here's a fun fact. While you guys were talking, I pulled up the head-to-head comparison on KG and Giannis. Giannis has a better 3-point shooting percentage for his career than Kevin Garnett. Giannis is 286 and KG was 275. So that surprised me a little bit. I feel like KG would have been a better shooter if he came up like in this era. Like, he probably would have worked on it a little bit more, because I that's just my opinion. But
yeah, and I think, when you factor in the mid range, KG definitely was just outside of the paint. He was definitely a better scorer than Giannis overall. Again, obviously Giannis is better in the paint. He's probably one of the best of all time in the paint. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting. There's some guys that you kind of think of as better shooters than they really are. One of them is always Anthony Davis, where like I feel like people just think AD is so much more skilled than Giannis, and you're like, the guy's shooting 29% from 3 again this season. Like his 3-point percentage is not as good as people think it is.
No.
It's always just kind of fun to look at some of that stuff. And
I feel like
again, Giannis has these stretches.
Too.
Yeah, he has. The last like 3-4 years, he's been consistently like right hovering just at or below 30%, which is basically what Giannis always is. But you don't hear the same narrative about AD as you do Giannis. But yeah, it's always interesting because Giannis will have these stretches where it's like he's shooting 39% from 3 over the last month, and it's like, what is going on? And then he goes back to being 22% for a month, and it's just like he's very hit or miss. He's very streaky, but he always ends up around that 30%-ish mark. So
I think perception's a big thing as well. Whereas, like, remember Anthony Davis had that game winner in the bubble against Denver. If you ever see the Bucks with a chance to win the game, and you're seeing Giannis taking a 3 when they don't need it, you'd kind of give like the Marcus Smart, though, like no, like like that's the shot. But yeah, if you look at the numbers, it's a lot closer.
Anthony Davis, the last 4 seasons has been consistently well under 30%. He, over that 4-year span, he is a 248 3-point shooter.
That's way worse than I thought, man.
He did have
like 29.
He had the one season in 2021-22 where he only played 40 games, but he shot 186 that year from 3.
Yeah.
After that, or the year before that, he was 260. Then it was 186, then 257 and 271. So trending back up, I guess, but.
So why are we not calling Anthony Davis? Why are we not calling Anthony Davis run and dunk man? Like, why are we only doing that with Giannis?
It's a good question. I mean, he only takes.
He's street clothes. He already has a nickname.
True. He takes less than 2 a game, so he barely shoots.
And again, that's what I'm glad Giannis got to that last year. I think Giannis, I off the top of my head, I want to say Giannis was at like 1.5 last year. So that was something that Giannis definitely. I'm happy with Giannis of doing is like, hey, don't be ashamed. Like, nobody's going to make fun of you for going, at least Bucks fans are not going to make fun of you for going in the paint every time. Like, that's where your bread is buttered. Like, go do what you're good at. I don't care if people call you not skilled. Like, go score 35 a game on 60% shooting,
Why is one thing skill when the other is not? Like, if he has the skill to
get to the rim and dribble
run and dunk better
finish
than anybody else, why is that not also skill?
It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense.
I know we've gone long for sure. We've gone probably about twice the amount of time that we intended to talk, but that's fine. I feel like we hit on pretty much just about everything. I know we're kind of coming up on Thursday Night Football too, and a lot of our viewers who are in here are probably Celtics fans, are probably also Patriots fans, so they might be getting ready to tune in for that against the Jets. But unless you guys have anything else, like, again, please feel free to stop me. But other than that, I feel like we're just about done. So for Alex and Nathan and myself, we will catch you guys next time.
Ends tonight here. It's over. Time to say it again, Boston. Anything's possible. Banner number 18 has been secured. The Celtics are NBA champions.